Hello.
Hi.
Would you like to share with us your name, where you are right now, and your practice? Where is it based?
Okay. So I am Heather Ann Keys, because when I moved to Mexico, I needed another name because just having two when everybody else had like five,
All
um,
right.
I started using all of my names in my professional practice. So Heather Ann Keys, and I am in Durango, Mexico.
Mhm.
And that is where I practice. I work online from this little corner of the world.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you. You may have thought this through, but
No thoughts.
no.
No thoughts.
Okay. Great. On the spot, who are you as a person, Heather?
I was really surprised to run into a bunch of people at a conference past couple of weeks. Apparently, I'm Heather who does humans. That was the identifier that was running in the crowd, which was surprising. I was like, oh, I guess I'm a person who does things sometimes. Um, and I decided to do this with you just because I was also curious to know who I am at this point, because I don't feel like entirely the same person I was when the project started, when I did not feel like I wanted to show up. Like, I am a person who is enjoying myself right now. Um, I'm a mom, so that's pretty figural and time consuming. It's like I am a unit of three people. It's a
Right.
very interdependent, symbiotic ecosystem. Um, I really liked something that Michelle Billy said in one of her interviews. It stuck with me for more than a couple of years now, is that I may be more of a mushroom than a person. Um, just because I'm a connector. I am a person who has very sort of deep underground root system with, but it's not a root system, it's a mycelial connection network. Um,
Mhm.
which seems a little shinier and a little bit more magical than just being like a tap-rooted um, dandelion or something.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm a Gestalt therapist. I, yeah, have a bunch of words that I could describe myself with, like I consider myself to be a feminist, I'm an activist, I'm a migrant, I am all kinds of things. So,
Okay.
not normal.
Nice.
Not normal. I've decided it's not statistically normal in most aspects of my life. So neurodivergent on a whole bunch of spectrums, but on the weird end, not in the middle where the normal people hang out. So
So rich identity. Okay.
kind of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you specialize in an area, Heather?
Um, I have. Pattern recognition has taught me over the years that I do best, and the people who do best with me are usually international weirdos in every sense. People who are not in their place of origin for any number of reasons.
Mhm.
People who are trying to understand themselves, their own package of values and beliefs and attitudes as they put it out in contact with the world around them, especially when that's different from the place where they originally picked up that set of values and beliefs. I also work with neurodivergent individuals, profoundly gifted, autism spectrum, ADHD, just odd or weirdly minded individuals. And a lot of that also overlaps with people who have unusual identity and relationship practices,
Okay.
which could be polyamorous, open relationships, kink, queer, BDSM, um, people who go in different directions with their way of being with other people in the world.
Right. Okay. Right. So that sounds like a little bit like uh, they're drawn to you as you are so,
It
you
we
have this
understand
very enriched
we
history.
understand each other.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Okay. So, who would you like to share with us has had the most impact on who you are today as a woman, the woman you are today, and in what way?
See, the funny thing about these questions is that they work because I had to
Mm,
figure it out as I'm answering. I don't know today who is the one who has had the most impact. Like, I don't carry around photos of people like idols on my wall, but I carry a lot of people with me.
right.
Today, I would actually probably because I'm doing this right now, I'd probably say the people who have participated in humans over the past 5 years.
Nice.
Like, that's the interview team. That's where my entire rebuilt post-apocalyptic divorce social network, that's where I've
Mhm.
rebuilt my practice. Um, that was where everything shifted, is when I started just sitting down and talking to people. And so anyone who was willing to show up and engage um, was, for the very least, at that moment of time, like the most significant person in my life space.
Right.
Because I decided to just be available and be curious. Um, and so some of those contacts and those connections, it's like when you go for a first date, it's like, oh, that was interesting. I would actually like to see you again. No offense to those I have not followed up with, but some of those were like, oh, yeah, we need more of this. And just discovering colleagues and friends and even partners, like just incredible connection with human beings. It's been
Fantastic.
crazy. Yeah. Just
Good.
that recognition of like, hey, I see this piece of you, and hey, Gestalt works, like my projection and their projection, and we discovered things we may not have known that we had. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's lovely. And um, has it has it impacted you the way you work, or has it changed your perspective on
Completely,
your relationship with the clients, for example? I don't know.
completely. It's like a meditative practice of sitting down and not knowing.
Right.
And
Mm.
just, I mean, the further I would get from sort of like a sphere of similarity of like, oh, these people are like me. We live in the same place or we went to the same school. I mean, I've been meeting people, I have to look their countries up on a map because my ignorance does not know where they are. Like, I don't even know how long that country's existed. Like, what was its genesis, much less, who are you for living there? Like, happy second birthday, North Macedonia. I mean, who knew? That was not on my map, right? Um,
Right.
but yeah, I mean that practice of not knowing and being curious is pretty
Mm.
fundamental. And I hadn't realized quite how many like layers of prejudice and prejudgment and assumptions I have to peel off. Um,
Absolutely.
it's definitely like it's a disciplined practice.
Mm.
And like I had a lot of, significant first conversations. I remember with Marianne Rainey, I had never sat down with a person of darker pigmentation and said, what is it like to be Black? After she self-identified in the interview as a Black woman, I was like, I have no idea how to talk about this.
Right.
And
Right.
I've learned all kinds of things that I had no idea how to talk about. Yeah, definitely put me in contact with a lot of chunks of myself
Mhm, mhm,
and developing my own identity um, in dialogue, really in relationship with other people.
mhm, mhm. So that's a great training to explore the momentum and just not to take anything for granted, I guess.
No, no, the not knowing is great. I also don't know where we're going. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know why we're here, but we've both
Yeah,
agreed that it matters enough to show up, so here we are.
nice, nice. Okay. So Are there any events that you could share with us or circumstances that have shaped you and how?
Like, am I still angry with it? I don't think I'm angry with it. I don't really
Mm,
like post-traumatic growth, though. I would like
mm,
growth without the prior trauma would be nice, like just being allowed to grow, not having
mm,
to do it in spite of, you know, harsh winds, hurricane hardships, attacks, violence, all of that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, like some of those things are defining moments, like, intimate partner, abusive relationships, and the death of my daughter. And, one of my like favorite examples when I teach things is like being carjacked at gunpoint by a band of like five highway robbers and things like that. It's like, oh, I wish those weren't things that defined me, but it's sort
mm,
of like, you put it in contrast with, oh, it actually differentiates me. It does not make me anything. It just really, how can I put this? It just pops out really clearly what I am not, and
mhm,
things that I would never do, and things that I would never choose. Um, And that sort of builds up a little bit of like quiet determination, which in me is a very dangerous thing, like in the back room of like, oh, well, now I'm definitely going to be, me. I'm not
mhm,
going to not be because I've discovered it in circumstances that I did not choose or that were somehow imposed on me. It's like, oh, but this is definitely going to make me be myself in a different way.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I didn't know, and I'm sorry to hear all this. Really, really hard things. You've been
Yeah,
through.
it's crazy, and it takes you into like really dark spaces that most people would choose not to explore.
Absolutely.
But it's like, oh, okay, well, I've been there, and the cliche is that it makes me a better therapist and it makes me a
Mm,
better person. Because it's really different to look at somebody and be like, oh my God, that's horrible when they're telling you something like that, than it is to sit there and go, oh yeah, that's fucked up. I've been there.
mm,
And
mm,
then
mm.
because you have a next, and the person who's sitting with you being in that may not quite believe that there is a next after it.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
that's a
why I like
great.
hanging out with older friends. Like intergenerational
Mm,
friendship is like, okay, these are people who have definitely survived stuff that I have not even been through yet. So if humanity can continuously, live into their 80s and 90s or beyond, apparently we can survive our lives. So
mm, mm.
yay.
Yeah, right. Um, so you are a living example of going on and in our lives and
Yeah, and I don't think I don't want to sit with that as like being what changes or
mm,
defines me really. I mean, the other things that I do choose, are probably
mm,
travel,
mm,
which I know is a privilege and a luxury, but it's something that I had to work for or sometimes put on credit cards I was lucky enough to have, but because it's been a necessity for me of just
of
needing to
course.
move in the world and be in my body, in movement, in
Right.
place, especially eating food. That's
Mhm.
one thing. Um, and just in contact, like being able to move. So I think it's the polarity of the freedom and then having some of that freedom and choice radically removed. Those are when I find two very clear pieces in who I am.
Right. Nice. Okay. Um, you just mentioned in movement, and it has come to me that it's going on is something that is an act of being in movement, and that's so therapeutic. I mean, you can freeze for a while, and it's okay, but the next thing is really to move, and I love that you referred to traveling and everything.
Hmm. Oh yeah, it's definitely like because I have to file extensive legal papers and things like that to be able to move beyond
Mm,
state borders or national borders because of the family court system here. So for me to
right.
say I am going someplace, it requires like determination and it becomes a whole goal and I need permission from
Mm,
systems that I don't respect, don't care about, and I'm kind of irritated that exist in my life.
mm,
But it becomes really satisfying to like achieve that. And I think even more so than people who are like, oh yeah, I have some clients who are very wealthy and they
mm,
plan and cancel trips as if they were just, crossing the street and going to the grocery store.
right.
Like, I just, I don't relate. I can appreciate their dilemmas. Um, but I'm like, wow, the appreciation that I have for freedom of movement
Right.
is massive.
And would you say, I may be totally wrong, but would you say that even subconsciously, the initiative you took to create this project and connect with people on the other side of the globe, would that be related to this feeling of being in movement or the need to be in movement?
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it was a pre-pandemic project, but I was basically living in like pandemic mode before the pandemic anyhow. The apocalyptic
In what way?
post-war situation, like the social isolation, the absolute, there is no money in my bank account. Like just a lot of, okay, so I can't go anywhere. And I'm definitely not positioned in a way that, people were going to be inviting me to go anywhere or do anything. Um, so it was a lot of need for connection and
Mm,
just realizing that what I need is not where I am. So I'm gonna have to, make some gigantic creative adjustments to figure out how to get what is outside of the box that's currently available to me.
absolutely, yeah.
Um, and I mean, I was a kid who grew up with the internet in my room since I was 16. So
Mhm.
like I would go to the library and use books, but this has always been a way of communicating and a way of connecting for me. And I've never been one of the people who's like, oh yeah, online life sort of partitioned from
Yeah.
real life. I mean, I'm quite sure that you are a full human being, and I certainly know that I am, and I'm not showing up in a way that's different from the way I'd show up, in your kitchen. Um,
Mm,
so this seemed really logical. I was like, well, I'm going to use what I know, which is a medium that allows me to be places that my physical body can't afford to be.
right.
And
Right.
it's one of those like the isolation again, the stupid post-traumatic growth. It necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Mm,
I
mm,
started projects. I remember I had spinal surgery when I was 16. I had scoliosis surgery. So I
right.
was supposed to be like lying on my back in a body cast for 3 months. So I had a lot of time to
Mm,
think
wow.
and a
Wow.
lot of like built up accumulated momentum. I was just like revving the engines on the inside. So it was a really creative, really generative kind of period. And so
Mm,
this sort of forced shutdown, you can't go anywhere because we live in capitalism. So if you can't pay for it, nothing is available to you. I was like, well, just sort of lying there like a little bug on my back again of like, okay, I will now figure out how to go somewhere for sure.
right. So, I mean, creativity and figure out what's there available and adjustment. And it really reminds me of Beiser's story.
Oh, I
And
cried with that documentary.
yeah, yeah, it's it's striking in the theory and the personality. So yeah. Mm. So, because you mentioned the societal framework you're in, what's happening with your gender? How do you experience your gender in that framework?
Um, well, I mean, by virtue of growing up in like 80s, 90s, white Anglo North America, um, there was, the unspoken work on the back of the feminist ancestors to
Mhm.
just walk into the world the way that I could, right?
Right.
Like we got education about menstrual health and birth control in middle school. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, okay. So I understood myself as a woman or as a female in that context. Um, it's been a lot of learning of everything that had to be undone and fought against for that to be available to me. So I started out in a very privileged position, and I mean, still under patriarchy. Like,
Ah,
it's pretty undeniable. It's like I walk into uh, I walk into a restaurant to have a coffee or dinner with a male friend or a colleague, and my credit card gets handed back to him at the end of the meal. Or I'm putting gas in my car, and the other day the gas attendant like looked at the guy I was giving a ride to and
nice.
isn't it cute you let her drive? I'm like, what? This is my car, man.
Yeah.
Um, and it's everywhere. It's
Yeah.
everywhere. The heteronormative patriarchy. It's pretty
Yeah.
interesting. It's just unexpected. It's like, what are you doing here? It's like you think you've cleaned out spiders and it's everywhere.
It's a very intense contradiction that I mean, all women experience,
Hmm.
even if they don't realize it or,
Well, and I mean, I live in Mexico now, right? So it's like I went from where I didn't have to know to a situation where, I mean, I actively fear for the lives of some of my female clients who live in Mexico because I live in a country where women will be chopped up into pieces and put in garbage bags and tossed in empty lots or just simply disappear. Like I live in one of the meccas for human trafficking. It's insane what it means to be a woman slash object in the world that I live in its most extreme representations. And it's something I can't not be aware of. So I mean, knowing that I know what I mean when I say, this is who I am and I'm a human and I'm a, female gendered whatever. But what the people around me understand me as an object to be, it's a pretty stark contradiction. I don't live in a humanistically integrated, morally bang on space.
no, it's very blared and yeah, and you have a responsibility as a therapist, as a woman therapist,
Mhm.
um, in this context. So I was wondering how's your experience with your age then?
Yeah, I would just said to a colleague at this conference in Veracruz that I just got back to, he's a couple of years older than I am, but we looked at each other and we went, finally don't feel like a kid.
Mm,
Like I don't get sat at the kids' table. I don't get like patted on the head um, by my power holding colleagues. Um, I mean, I'm 43, which is great. Like the white streaks have been coming in, and the mom body has settled in. It's like you did some
mm,
things these years, and
right.
now there will be not consequences because it's not like punishment, but there are
Mm,
effects of the
yeah.
life that I've lived. Like, 3 full-term pregnancies do things to abdominal muscles. So
Mm,
yeah,
mm,
it's being in the body that I'm in, and at a certain level being seen as that like adult. And
mm.
inside, I am some kind of ridiculous off the wall, like 7-year-old most of the time. Like all of those different levels that I've already been through are very much alive and integrated, and we all go to the party together.
Oh,
So I'm not walking around being like a real adult all the time. That would be a lot.
that's a great way to put it, Heather.
It's not to be like two family systems about things, but I have definitely integrated my parts. And there's, a wiser, more mature part of me that I have not yet grown into, I'm sure. I'm really curious what she would do, I guess. sometimes I'm like, I'm just making stuff up. So
So, I mean, no age crisis, no any concerns or.
definitely more like curiosity and excitement than any kind of crisis. Um,
Great.
come to terms with, I've done what I've done with the years that I've had, and I feel satisfied, which is
Mm-hmm.
something that, for me, it's a part of coming to terms with things like grief and loss, right? It's like, oh, well, I'm not left wanting, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay. I'm okay to be where I am and to have done what I've done. And if there was something that was missing, it's clearly something I'm just gonna go get later. And I can wait. So,
Mm-hmm.
and some of that
That's.
is, going and getting it from different people in different situations.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about lamenting, oh, I can't go back. No, can't. So figure out what I need and go find it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's the process. So yeah, yeah. So as far as the power and privilege, uh, you kind of mentioned and uh, your view on this very vague um, world, between sexes. But do you feel like you're privileged or you have some kind of power, maybe in the therapy room, or I don't
Um,
know.
I'm such a nerd. I was like, okay, how much privilege do I have? What are all the kinds of privilege a person can have? Because when I find out about something that I didn't know about, no one, sat me down and talked to me about privilege until they did, um, which was probably about 2018. So I was new to this whole, social justice, activism. There's language for an anti-oppressive way of being in the world and of practicing psychotherapy. I
Mm,
was late coming into this. I mean, people have known this for generations, like the decolonizing and the kinds of therapy that have openly dealt with race, class, gender, sex, ethnicity, um, all of that kind of stuff. I was like, oh, okay. So there's just things that I can learn and then I'll understand. So
mhm,
I've been doing a lot of, self-understanding of where I've been positioned, whether I've earned that or not.
mhm,
And it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, I do have a lot of things, and some of them I have earned, and
mhm,
understanding that privilege is about what I have not earned and why it just gets handed to me. And, while the guy at the gas station will give the card to the man in my car, when I go to a restaurant, people give me the menu instead of my black and brown colleagues.
exactly.
Okay, no.
Yeah.
So, the hierarchies are unfortunately quite stark. So I'm aware of where I sit and I'm aware of where I intersect with other identities. I mean, I
Mm,
look like this and I sound like this. That I'm not changing. I can't. Um, but at the same time, I say I've become a bit of like a Trojan horse pinata in a room because
mhm,
people don't expect me to be as radically anti-oppressive as I am. And
mhm,
they're like, oh yeah, and they expect like a Canadian Anglo soccer mom to have a comfortable life and have a lot of, socioeconomic privilege. I mean, I may get the socio, but I don't have the economic to back it up. You
mhm,
can give
mhm.
me access to things, but like I can't afford them. And none of the
Right.
people that I hang out with can afford them.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, and I'm also sort of at a point where, what do I do with my privilege? What do I do with this awareness of the things that I do have access to? Because for me, that's one of the big things about privilege is, it just lets you like walk into the room, have the seat at the table, eat at the buffet, right?
yeah.
I'm like, well, who can I take with me?
Mm,
It's
mm,
it's sort of the community mentality instead of the individualism is one of the biggest shifts that I've definitely experienced. Um,
mm,
and even from a family nucleus perspective, I'm like, great, you've invited me to go do a thing. There are three of me. I go places, I have to go everywhere with my kids.
Yeah.
I can't not. And
Mm.
so when I get invited, hey, would you like to go teach? Would you like to do this? First of all, if it's physical travel, there are three of us, so that gets expensive. So I don't travel often. I don't get invited to do that. And when it's, would you like to come into a space? My thoughts are, would I invite my friends into this space? Would they feel comfortable? Would they be safe? Because I've had the experience of organizing, conferences and events and things within pretty traditional models. And tradition is like the colonial normative, misogynistic, sort of old white man club.
Mm.
And I've I've been able to access that and repeat their models, but it has not been safe for
Mm.
my friends and colleagues. And I will not continue to perpetuate that harm. I don't even want to go to those spaces anymore.
Yeah.
So I've started to say over the past probably 3, 4 years, I've said no to a lot more things. And I've been like, what if I just stop doing that if I can't take my community with me? And, we've ended up doing very different things, like this conference that we're about to do online, which is like, we already have space. We don't need to go into or fight to
Mm.
access
Mm.
spaces that belong to dying dinosaur institutions anyhow.
Mm.
Like I don't even want to go to those spaces anymore. They're not fun. They're incredibly stressful in my nervous system. And, they hurt my friends. So like I don't want to go. Thanks. It's, privileged to be able to be invited, but it's sort of one of those privileges that upholds a whole system. I'm like, no, I'll
Right.
take, I'll have the privilege to go, and then I'll take it over here.
But it seems not. It seems it's true. It's a fact that you created this privilege. You created that space with the people that are close to you in ideology, philosophy, and in where you feel safe anyway. And
Well, I wouldn't say I privilege other things. I give advantage or I give preference very
mhm,
heavily
mhm, mhm.
to completely different things. And
Right.
and I definitely hope, that it's not tokenistic or performative, but it's very much it's a much deeper way of being like,
Mm.
no, not that. Whatever is not that, let's try it. I'm open.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it shows. I mean, you're so modest, and I'm not sure if you realize how successful it has been, this project, and it has given voice, and you've given indeed some privilege, and you kind of you know gave open a pathway, to for people who don't know about Gestalt to have access to, or because sometimes they ask me, what do you think is the core, goal of this project? And I think that, I've thought this through, and I answer, I think it's who is the person behind the therapist.
Well, yeah, it's much beyond. I was like, oh, what is the goal? Please tell me. I don't know what I've been doing this whole time. Like, yeah, I'm just stupidly simple. I'm like, this is about human beings. It's about humans. That's why it's called humans. I did not overthink this, like it's just the curiosity of who are you?
Yeah.
And does that open a door to Gestalt? Yes. Does Gestalt also have limitations in the way that it's currently practiced? Yes.
Hmm.
So instead of just focusing on that room in the house, like, fly the drone and give everybody the whole panorama. Like, there are people living in the world who also happen to, use some Gestalt language and practice in that
Hmm.
way, or maybe live that way, or maybe live that philosophy, or however they describe it, right? But it's just a point of connection. Like the project is much more about humans than it is about Gestalt. I think that's even why the letters in the word humans are way bigger than the ones in the word Gestalt.
So you mentioned Canada, Heather. Is this where you're from?
I was born in Canada. I lived there for the first 21 years of my life. Um, I, yeah, went through gifted education program, which was really quite significant. Then I moved away from the gifted education program, which was also massively significant and, led to a whole bunch of unsupported, not understood mental health like crises years, which I resolved by traveling. Um,
Mm,
when I lost my sort of safe space where I was contained and challenged at the same time, um, I just set off on a little quest to go find it again because I
mhm,
could not be where I was. It was not okay for me. So that was significant. And, my father died when I was young. He had a genetic disease, which I'm also a carrier of. Yay, Fabry Anderson Club. But it's one of those things of like, yep, I've taken experiences from that. I was, raised by a single mom after her divorce.
mhm,
Um, my family's wonderful, and we are incredibly disconnected.
mm,
So my understanding and my way of being with my family is definitely not what 90% of my Mexican friends and colleagues
mm,
understand by the word family.
mhm.
Um, and at the same time, like I go back and 15 years later, I'm in one of my cousin's kitchens and their kid is looking at us because three of us grew up together, really close in age. And their daughter's like, "You say exactly what my mom says." Like, yeah, yeah, the
Wow.
foundational things really,
Yeah.
really are still very strong.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
yeah.
Nice.
And
So,
my daughter jokes because she says, like I got glasses, I got the little bob haircut, and she's like, "Oh, you're becoming a Canadian señora." I'm like, I am. I am. I'm a señora Canadiense. So
like a unique species, right?
yeah, I mean, you take me out in the sun and I turn pink. Like there's no two ways about it. I've been in
Right.
Mexico for 23 years.
All
Um,
right.
I'm a Mexican citizen, but in a lot of ways, like I will never be Mexican. First of all, culturally, like you can't assimilate into. I've accepted that. I'm allowed to live here. Um, but I am and I'm not. I had somebody tell me last year I'm not allowed to self-identify as Mexican. I'm like, funny that I have a passport that says that I hold the Mexican nationality then. It sort of fundamentally implies that person doesn't, allow for the concept of immigration.
Nice.
Like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of people who actually do feel belonging to places we weren't born, and we are allowed to self-identify. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, it's the joke of like, hey, I'm transnational. It's,
Right. Right.
but am I culturally Mexican? Is that, the language that my grandmother spoke at home? No, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
Mexican enough.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely been through some very uniquely Mexican things. The people who carjacked me were, very Mexican highway
All
bandits.
right.
This is not an experience that I would have had in rural Canada.
Mm-hmm.
The places that I've been have definitely shaped and changed me. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's the part of like you can look at this and you can hear this accent, but there are other things that have definitely been integrated on a very, very deep level.
Absolutely. Okay. So Heather, how did you come to Gestalt therapy?
Um, I had finished my undergraduate. Sorry, hello dogs. I had
Mm-hmm.
finished my undergraduate, which was basically in social anthropology, so I'm not a psychologist.
Nice.
Latin American cultural studies, technically, is what it was called. Uh, but I'd been living in Mexico doing my last undergrad semester on
Mm-hmm.
exchange because I ran out of credits to take at my university. And I picked the cheapest exchange program they had left because I could not stay in Canada for a lot of reasons. I was just not in a good place. I don't do well in concrete boxes following
Mm-hmm.
linear paths. Um, So they were like, we have this one. It was like literally at the back of a box, all dusty because nobody ever done that exchange. They had the agreement, but I was like, I'll take that one. It's like the weird puppy that's left over.
Nice.
I took that one. So I came to Mexico. I was there doing that, and I needed therapy. So I started spending a lot of time in therapy with Gestalt therapists. And they're like, maybe you should start taking some courses.
Mm,
Because it was pretty clear I was also not going to be going back to Canada to do my master's, which was, what the linear predicting algorithms would have said. Um, I flew up to Canada and did my intake interview for grad school, and I walked into the professor's office and I said, I can't do this. I'm
mhm,
sorry for
mhm,
wasting your time. We sat there and we had a tea. I
mhm.
was like, I can't. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow and I'm going home to Mexico.
Nice.
So I needed to study something because my brain gets bored. And
Mm,
they were like, why don't you just study what I studied? Like that's that beautiful projective thing of people just
of
sharing what
course.
they have. I don't know if it's what you actually need, but I've got this here, try it.
Mhm,
So I did, and it was really hard for me to get through my master's training um, because I was living like a crazy abusive relationship and also learning about, integrity and all of these totally contradictory things.
of course.
And I actually left two or three different master's cohorts,
Mhm,
um, and then I came back.
mhm,
And also, I was like, okay, yeah, so my way of doing therapy and the group process parts, like, was really intense and really complex and really, people are like, oh, you're a lot. I get, you're too much, you're a lot. So I was like, okay, I'll just step out and let the rest of the group do what they do.
mhm,
Um, because I mean, like in objective terms, if you look at like a ratio of space and time that I was taking up, I was like, yeah, I am statistically a lot. Does not mean too much,
mhm,
but I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna back out. And then I'd come back. And
mhm,
what ended up happening is that I integrated with faculty. And by
mhm,
the time I finished, I was sitting in an adjunct on the supervision groups. Um, and then I became involved with well, one of the faculty, built a whole life, got married, had some kids. That was a whole story that I want to give him no credit for. Um, but ended up becoming a Gestalt trainer, teacher, thesis advisor, all of that kind of stuff, because I really loved it. And it sort of became like my little home for quite a while. And then in 2012, I sent Rita Resnick an email because somebody said, hey, have you heard about the conference in Mexico? And that's
mhm,
when I came out of the bubble that I've been trained in. And Rita's like, hey, we need volunteers. Want to join some committees? Um,
mhm,
it's a trap. Don't ever say yes to those kinds of things. My God. Um, but then I got involved with AAGT, which is now IAAGT. And, we've
mhm,
had a whole tumultuous 12-year relationship with the organization at that point. But that's when I realized there was a whole global community of people doing this in
mhm.
many, many different ways. And it was that sense of belonging that I'd been looking for. It,
Right.
definitely the pitfalls of living in community. There's people in it with all of
Yeah.
humanity. Um, but it was more of a meaningful space and it was safe and solid enough for me to be able to grow. And so I built like scale models of that community here in Mexico. And I started trying to create professional community here in Mexico. And, I've done
Mm,
so many weird experiments. I just sort of let myself do things. It's like, oh, this is what the voices say to do next, so I do it. We choose not to medicate them in my house. But it's like, oh, they're creative muses and inspirations. They're not the schizophrenic kind of voices. But it's the okay, so I'll try this and I'll do that. And Gestalt was very encouraging and forgiving when it wasn't horribly judgmental and frustrating. Um,
yeah.
and it sort of came to the point where I'm tired of actually building spaces, mostly because honestly it involves money. which is
Mm,
the thing, like trying to create it and pull it together and then giving it to a hotel chain. And like all of that work and none of the therapists involved in those kinds of gatherings, like we don't get to go home and buy ourselves an extra chocolate, because of it. On the contrary, we're taking away to be able to be together. And I mean, I can't continue to buy that as, it's an investment. Is it,
mm,
waiting for the rewards, like the proportional economic rewards on my investment, since I started putting money into trainings.
yeah.
It's a
Uh,
horrible model. Like it is, if this was like a timeshare condo that I've been putting money into, I'm like, when do I get to go spend a weekend on the beach? I'm still paying to go. I'm like, this is not, well, actually, I'm not. To be really honest, most of the places that I've gone, I've just been on scholarship because I've said I can't afford to be there.
right.
And then
Good
what I
for you.
well, good for me, good for Bud Feeder, good for, people who do offer scholarship spaces and
Yeah, of
considerations, because
course.
otherwise I would not have what I have. I would not have been able to access it. And so I do things like I apply my creativity to doing fundraisers and all of this stuff, um,
Mm,
to make sure that I put back, 3 to 5 times what I take out of the fund. But it's just, for me, it's ridiculous because it's like putting money into a bad business model. Um, so I start doing other weird things in Gestalt, like this was your question, right? What do I do? This is what I do. I make things. I make
mm,
spaces. I sit around and I come up with ideas, um, based on what's available to me. And humans was like, I have an internet connection, I think, and maybe there are people who will want to talk,
mm,
not with the aim of planning or organizing or trying to do something, just like a space to be. And so I create those. And then I find
mm,
people who have really cool ideas, and I'm like, hey, if I can open you like a Zoom room and get more people in it, would you like to show up and be who you are and do what you do? And so that's how we
mm,
get a conference 5 years later,
yeah.
which is exciting. It's like, oh, I guess that's what I do now.
Mm, mm.
I make spaces and I connect people to other people.
You make spaces and you connect with other people, yeah.
And
Mm,
I really enjoy it and I feel, immensely enriched. And I have this, it's sort of like I think it's one of my more autistic kind of traits is that I definitely I give huge proportional importance to the people that I'm in relationship with. And those
mm,
relationships may be very short. Like it may be 1 hour long interviews, but I definitely integrate that on deeper than usual levels. It's like, oh yeah, we're friends now. Of course we are.
mm,
Um, and I mean that speaks definitely to some of the other, gaps, let's just say, in my map of where people would usually find those deeper level connections.
mm,
I mean, that's what happens when you go scorched earth after a divorce and leave an institute and you leave many communities over the years. It's like, okay, well, there's a lot of new growth, let's just say, in my forest. So
mm. Nice. Thank you for mentioning all these things. It was really, really, I mean, I really appreciate it. And I was wondering, what are you the most attracted by in Gestalt practice theory?
um watching people do things. Maybe I'm like in the voyeur phase. I want to be in the being and the doing. I don't want to be in the talking about. Um,
Mm, mm,
I've written a couple of articles, published a couple of articles. It's like, oh, that was fun. Not what I want right now.
right.
Because I think by the time, you've like spread it out, you've clearly had to dissect the whole thing. It's dead. Like,
Mm,
you.
mm, mm,
I'd rather be in a room that's messy and things are happening and people are being. So I'm coming much more into that kind of like let's do things and be alive. Um, what I do like is humor. That's my special little theory, niche
Mm.
nerdiness, uh, which is fun because it's sort of understanding, how the room is wired. It hits on so many different kinds of sensitivities and points of connection, which are the exact same points of explosive disconnect.
Mm.
If you weight the joke wrong, it will definitely not land well. And it's like, oh, okay, but the idea of all of the humor theory, like it just it highlights so many of the mechanisms of how we interact with each other and how we structure or destructure our connections. I love that bit. Um,
Mm.
and it's playful, it's engaging, and it's fun.
Mm.
Um, and also the whole learning. I am definitely not like some kind of neuro specialist, but
Mm.
just the patterns in the neurodivergent brains.
Mm.
I pick the weirdos out of the room. I am I am drawn to specific kinds of people, who are often sort of sitting right beside the door, ready to go. Like I'm the only one in the room. I'm just gonna leave. Um, so I'm like, no. And sometimes I'll leave with them, and then we'll just drift into the hallways and hang out on the fringes of things. Um, because I don't really want to be in a statistically normal room either. It
Mm.
doesn't feel like
Mm.
home.
So
So
it's like you include the imperfections that we all carry, and that's
I
how
would,
I've experienced it anyway.
yeah, I would
With
definitely not say imperfections.
mm,
Just characteristics of human beings.
yeah,
But I think
mm,
that's why I cast such a wide net, because if I want like the 1 in 1,000 people, because I will identify with that person,
mm,
um, I'm not going to do well in a room of 10 people because the chances of that 1 in 1,000 being in the room are not good. So I end up feeling very lonely. I end up feeling, very disconnected.
mm,
Um, but if I cast a net wide enough, then I get 3 bioluminescent shrimp. And look, we are no longer alone. We have a community.
nice. Okay, yeah. So, your involvement in Gestalt. I mean, you presented it, and you're a doer, and I really admire that, and I really didn't know all these things, into depth. Is there anything you could add as far as your involvement?
Um, I know. I think I'm good. It's mostly I'm just enjoying the fact that it's okay for me to be online.
Hmm.
Because like I said, this is not new for me. This is not, oh my God, I'm revolutionizing. It's like, oh, thank you. Finally, I can go
Hmm.
back to where I was when I was 17, where all I really need is an internet connection. I can do what I
Hmm.
do quite legitimately. And I mean, I guess this is a bigger piece because I'm not licensed. I am not condoned by state to do
Hmm.
what I do in a lot of the places that I do it, but I'm doing it on the internet. So it's very
Right.
much a sort of subversive hacker
Mm.
kind of approach, very, very much an anarchist, like yay, Paul Goodman and Jack Aylward. I'm a licensed psychotherapist in Mexico. For 95% of the people I see in Mexico, absolutely not.
Mm.
But there are people who don't have access to the conventional services and or can't find practitioners who speak their languages, understand their cultures, or can meet them where they need to be met on the sliding financial scale of therapy. Um, so we hang out on the internet and we talk.
Right.
I'm not going to out myself as illegally practicing psychotherapy. I am a person who talks to people on the internet, and the way that I do psychotherapy is very ethical. Like I'm a very ethical human being, I've realized. Like I get very upset about fundamental ethics violations and injustice.
Mm.
So that was the second master's that I got into, and then I was like, this is too much. I was doing a master's in bioethics.
All
Uh,
right.
but I was like, oh, well, in first semester, I have learned the principles of bioethics. And so I can articulate,
Mm.
um, sort of what my position is and why I work the way I do and how I do that. And I
Right.
definitely want people to get the support that they need because it's better than no support. And that's the where it meets the connective part of me is, guess what? I do know a therapist in Greece you can go see if you're having an acute crisis.
Mm.
And I do know someone you can trust in Siberia, in Mongolia, in South Africa, in like unusual places. So I don't feel that I'm going beyond the scope of ethical practice.
Mhm.
Um, and some of the clients that I see are so far outside of what conventional psychotherapy would deal with. There are very few other options for support. Like some of my clients live on the internet to the degree of being content creators and Twitch streamers.
Right.
If you take a survey in some of the, British Gestalt Journal conferences, how many people can correctly identify what a Twitch streamer even is? Do you have any idea? Like
Mm.
what living in an avatar and being an online streaming gamer is? No, I
Exactly.
don't either. Like I'm not that kind of online nerd. I'm a different kind,
Mm, mm,
but
mm,
I'm available and there's enough intersection that I can
mm,
help people who are outside of the scope of the regular mainstream systems anyhow.
mm, mm. Right. This sounds like a specialty to be.
I am not going to have enough lifetime left for psychotherapy to achieve its potential.
Mhm,
Like, yeah, in theory, human beings could heal human beings and we could, you know, care for each other and connect and create community. We've put so many policies and barriers to that being able to happen. Like humans are dumb. Once we build something, we don't want to take it down. So the deconstruction of all of those institutional frameworks, it's going to take way longer than, any of us have to live. So psychotherapy as I know it, as I'm practicing it in the times that I'm living, it's not allowed to do what it could do. So maybe I'm
mhm.
not doing the psychotherapy that's allowed to exist. I'm just out here doing weird stuff with people
Okay.
because that's what's available to me. And I don't,
Yeah.
I've decided that I do not fight the system. Like
Mhm,
some of the classic ideas of will I speak truth to power? Yes. Will I engage in a debate? It depends how long it's going to take. Like
right.
I don't have time for that. And my nervous system is like, you
Mm,
have this much space left before you dysregulate. So don't get in a fight with a system that's going to win. I might like rage at it and rail at it and put a sticker on it or something, but that's about as actually subversive as I get. I
mm.
sort of am much more in like, oh, there's a lot of empty space in the world. I'm just gonna go over there and do something else.
Yeah, it sounds like that. Yeah, yeah. Like you put a spot, like a light on that area. Yeah,
Yeah, like we could stay here and fight against the castle, or we could like go out into this clearing in the forest and have a picnic.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's pretty much what I do.
Okay. So, um, your your relationship with Gestalt community, theory, or whatever the perception you have on Gestalt, did at any point turn into something different? Was it uh, into your perception in how you see your colleagues or yourself, or in what
I
way?
think I think there were a lot of shifts. One was like a very emotionally dysregulated, I have no structure, like need to
Mm,
learn all the theory. Um, that went on for a while, so I learned a lot of theory. Being a thesis advisor, surprisingly, you have to read a lot of books and articles. Um, so that was really helpful. So I got to like overdose on the intellectual structural part. Then I invited Miriam Taylor down to Mexico, and I just came to a full stop. I was like, wait, what? Trauma? Because I had not voiced or languaged, because that's not in the other older literature because it didn't exist. It was not a thing. So she was a pivot point, like sitting there just going, oh, 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 okay, so I can define many things in my own life through that lens, and then reframing all of that. Um, and then a colleague named Pascal from Norway reached out after I forget what podcast or interview thing she saw me on. She's like, "You said the word gifted. Um, have you joined this neurodivergent, twice exceptional therapist group?" I'm like, "No, I have not. I will be
Mhm.
doing that." And so
Mhm.
that's the other lens that comes in, um, and really changes how I hold things. And coming back into the feminist space and understanding in many, many different iterations, like the queer lens that I hold, be that neuro queer, be that relationship queer, be that just whatever I am or however I am, finding people who hold like queering Gestalt. We are doing this differently. Let's put that forward. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's definitely changed. And the whole idea of identity development and identity awareness, I'm like, Debbie Plummer gave a keynote speech in Toronto in 2018 talking about her book. Some of my friends are referring to interracial friendship.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute. No, actually, none of my friends currently are. I live in a brown world, lots of shades of brown. But I was like, whoa, I have reduced. I've had that Gestalt experience of becoming neurotic in
Mm.
losing the wider perception of the world around me, and I'm not connected beyond what's immediately available to me. Um, and so that intentionally listening to very different voices that don't usually get centered has been fundamental.
Right.
It's a very different Gestalt
Yeah.
depending on whose body and lived experience and mouth it is coming out of and what language they frame that in. Um,
Mhm.
so it's definitely changed.
Mm. Mm.
And I mean, just even my starting point was not white Anglo Gestalt. My starting point was Mexican. My postgraduate training was all in Spanish with,
Right.
pseudo shamanic, post colonial,
Mm.
uh, contemporary urban Mexican facilitators. I mean, we had a Costa Rican and a Chilean on staff where I
Mhm.
trained, but that was it. I I,
Mm.
I learned Mexican Gestalt,
Right.
and so even realizing how many different versions of all of that there are, like the books that have not been translated, it's like, oh, well, okay, so you can include and add and expand and grow.
Mm. So because you just mentioned the Mexican Gestalt, I was just wondering through these interviews, have you detected any major differences in the approach of an American therapist or a European therapist, for example,
Massive. I
as
mean,
opposed to an Indian one? I don't know.
massive, massive. Like everything that we do is completely different because it filters through our bodies.
Hmm.
And those bodies have location, age, gender, color, all of those things. And of course it makes it completely different. Like you
Hmm.
you can't pass some kind of universal substance through 25 different intersectional identity filters and get
Yeah.
the same result.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
no, everyone is doing this completely differently and not in an abstract way. Like those intersectional markers of our identity, that's absolutely what makes it different.
Hmm. But I mean, of course, and apart from the generational,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, you know, and the field, what the field brings, the political, the societal, um, um, points one carries. It's just, can you actually identify, you know, how an American therapist approaches Gestalt as opposed to European, or the same theoretical frame that one reads it in a completely different way from a European
Well,
one.
I don't think I can identify that, but I think that if you ask the right question, the person can identify how they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
I mean, when somebody says field theory, like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, yeah,
And your version of a field, I mean, is that
yeah,
a rice field in Cambodia, or what do you even like imagine when you say the word field? Are
yeah.
you looking at some kind of French countryside? Does your field have landmines in it? Like, what is a field?
Mm, mm.
And people locate themselves in the world in time, space, body, culture,
Right.
language when they give you that answer. I mean, language is especially fascinating, right? Because there are concepts, that are
Mhm.
cultured into these abstracts, which are words.
Yeah.
And some concepts are figural in some cultures and don't even exist in others.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
can I?
Well,
And when you say like an American therapist, I'm like, right, American. But what am I? Am I Mexican or am I Canadian? If we're going
mm,
by national identity, or
mm.
uh, everyone will have their
Well,
completely unique
yeah, we have
concept.
to narrow it down. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
of
but I mean,
course.
are they parroting white Anglo-American concepts which are officially taught, like the doctrine or oh,
Mm,
okay, well, I can recognize that. I could be like, well,
mhm.
that sounds like Lynn Jacobs, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
that's a student of Lynn Jacobs. I can be like, that's definitely Verwilla Frank coming out of somebody else's mouth. Because
Yeah.
these people, they're brilliant, wonderful human beings who have
Mhm,
their very unique voice. And then when that
mhm,
is interjected instead of being assimilated, we have a problem.
mhm.
Because then we're just carrying around like little pieces of instead of making it our own.
We should create a dictionary, Heather.
Many people have.
Yeah, yeah. Or, what is field for use? All kinds of versions.
Well, I know of at least two Gestalt dictionaries.
Mm, mm.
There's Jean-Marie Robin has a little like phrase book. It's like a Gestalt traveler's phrase book. And
Yeah.
Paco Fernandez has one in Spanish, Gestalt in few words, right?
Mm, mm,
But even all of those are both limited and identified and
mm,
anchored
mm.
in their language of
Yeah,
origin.
yeah, yeah. Nice. Um, and how has Gestalt therapy has affected your life and you as a person?
It's going to require that I go to therapy for many more years. It's 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 the cliche of like it's a home. It's definitely the place that I identify and hang out. Um, and it's given me like a ground to push back on as well, to be like, oh, it's okay for me to differentiate and to have, you know, my own way of doing and being. I haven't yet been excommunicated or excluded. I have not been asked to leave, or to not represent. And it's funny because it has that like really squishy, soft growing edge. Um, and there is a contact boundary for sure of this is definitely outside and not Gestalt. But once you're on the inside, you could push that growing edge, pretty much infinitely, which is like the challenge of it, which is fun.
Mm, mm, mm.
Because if it's
All right.
coming from inside, it is part of Gestalt, whatever you're doing.
Mm, mm. So, I mean, would you say that you fulfilled a part of theory with your actions at some point in your life that you can
Um,
identify now and say, ah, that was,
well, I'm paradoxical pretty much all day, every day.
yeah, I
So
was gonna say,
that,
yeah.
yeah, I am what is. And I'm also constantly sitting there going, well, what else could I do? What else could I be? How else? What's next?
Nice.
Um, yeah,
Mm, mm,
that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I mean, definitely in and of and in relationship with field.
Mhm, mhm.
and sort of questioning the whole self other non dichotomy a lot.
Great. And do you feel like a part of Gestalt community? I mean, you know,
Yeah,
and
I'm the one
if
having the party in the woods outside where the community is doing normal community things. Definitely.
right.
It's fun. Like it was a kick that people have been recognized and connected to each other. Um, and so if my contribution has in some way been like creating spaces for people to meet each other,
Mm,
I don't have to go and like go on their dates with them, I don't have to be in their new projects or be in all of their workshops. Like I'm I'm just happy to have like expanded it a little bit so that people could configure in different ways.
you're the matchmaker, right?
A little bit, yeah. And the funny thing is I even do that with my clients. Like I had two clients in Mexico City.
Mm.
I thought that one of them had referred the other one. And I was like,
Ah,
you two need to go just have a coffee because they're both feeling lonely and isolated and they have so much in common. And they're going to go
oh,
have coffee next week. So, I mean, that's where I can do weird things. But it's just my fundamental nature. I'll ask permission. And
mm,
if they want to participate in the experiment, great. But most of my experiments inevitably revolve around connection.
You may have saved their lives.
I don't think so. I mean, I might have saved them from being bored,
Bored
going on a
or
bad
yeah,
Tinder date or something.
or yeah, 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 yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. Good. Um, any fantastic, great memories you have from your training or any special, you know, meeting with a person?
There's a couple that stand out. Both of them
Mm,
actually happened in 2014 at an in-person event, and there's many online ones.
mm,
One was I was an interpreter because that's another fun thing that I like to do. I love
mm.
it keeps my attention, like having to repeat word for word everything that's said in a seminar. Um,
Right.
Definitely makes me pay attention. It goes through me in a different way. But I was interpreting for Lynn Jacobs and Manuela Fink, and a Japanese participant
Mm,
had this gigantic existential revelation towards the end of the work. And she just said, it's okay for me to be here. And started sobbing. It's like, yeah.
right. Right. Out of the blue,
But
right.
seeing someone come into that awareness, like in full body and full self and language and everything, like, oh, yeah, that kind of
Mm,
stuff definitely stands out.
mm,
And another one is, reading someone's bio and saying, I want to meet you.
mm,
And being able to make a space on the golf cart between workshops. I'm Tally Mirkin, who is a very gifted, gifted specialist, Israeli Gestalt therapist. And she
mhm.
helped me through some of my very, like, too much for most people uh, therapy process.
Right.
So, yeah, just like somebody
Mm,
making space for me on their golf cart and
mm,
the whole existential, like, it's okay for me to be here is big.
mm,
Um, yeah, yeah, lots of other things of like mentors and people who I've really cared about who have taught me how to get sick and die and
mm,
go through all of those processes like very, very deeply.
mm,
Like, I mean, I really learned as a person in Gestalt.
mm, mm, mm,
Um, because I was not really good at that. So the
mhm.
anthropology was useful to study like, how people make cultures. But how I needed a lot of group therapy and a lot of community to be able to do that in. So yeah, like the experiences of being my full self are very Gestalt centered. And have I
Yeah.
been able to go and do that in other places in the world? Yes. But those are definitely like transferable skills. that I've taken from.
Yeah, and utilize them, and you seem so appreciative of those encounters. Yeah. Um, any challenging moments, any difficult moments? Um,
Lots.
yeah.
Lots of challenging moments, lots of overstimulation, going beyond my own limits and boundaries, or trying really hard or getting really like locked into difference and trying to be right, or finding people who are just not going to stop pushing back, even though it's been hurtful and it's been like, no, actually, we need to step this back. You can be right, but I still get to exist, and I'm right in a different way. Um, and I mean, just the fact that Gestalt has been also the ground for my intimate interpersonal relationships. Um, a lot of those things, have been weaponized or have been disguised as therapeutic kind of challenges, when in a lot of occasions, like, it's just been flat out violence. So I've experienced a lot of violence in Gestalt communities, intentional and unintentional, and like psychopathically joyful harm being done. Like, I've definitely run into some extremely sadistic individuals who are not okay. Um, and that's where the learning is like, well, now I know what it feels like when someone like that walks into a room and I want to jump out a window. um,
And have the power. Yeah.
yeah, the differentiation has been useful, and the knowing what I'm able to tolerate and what will dysregulate me and make
Mhm.
me look like a crazy person. Yeah, I can tell those apart now. So
Mhm.
the learning that had to take place for me to know that was not pleasant. Um, but I mean, when I say that, my Mexican Gestalt is so classically Mexican, um, the son of the founder of the Institute is in prison for
Oh,
feminicide. He
mhm.
had his wife gang raped and murdered in front of him.
Oh my God.
And the money that students are paying for tuition, the family is funneling that to try and defend him and keep him alive in prison. So, having gone through systems like that, there's a lot of differentiation on my part of, I know which side I'm on. I know where my money would be going and where it's not. I know ethically where I am and where I'm not. And understanding and validating everything from like, wow, yeah, that guy who gave us the copies in the back room there was just as creepy as every woman who ever had to go back there knew.
Right.
And, living in a land of extreme examples and dramatic examples, um, I've learned to be very sensitive to, like, yeah, worst case scenarios do exist. I am in the land where they come to be. Uh,
Right. Right.
so respecting and, appreciating that some people are very lucky that
Mm.
they won't witness, but that the seeds and the discomfort that some of that violence in particular, um, could become, just validating that and being like, yeah, there are some really dark, very crazy, creepy things in the world.
Mhm.
And Gestalt is part of the world. Gestalt is,
No, of course.
so that's all in there as well. And the darkness and the predatory bits and the things that don't feel good, they're right there.
Yeah. Heather, thank you for saying that. That's the whole picture. You just put out the whole picture, and it seems like you had to put an extra effort to differentiate yourself from that. Um, wow, very dreadful example.
Yeah. But I've been
Mm.
able to. And a lot of people are still in the process of being like, whoa, what did just happen to me? Was that what I thought it was?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
we're just floating in the ocean on the beach and it's lovely, but somebody's like, was that a shark? I think that was a shark.
Yeah. Could be divvies. Yeah, I could
Like, well,
be.
yeah, there are sharks. They
Yeah.
exist. Very much very real things. So,
Nice, nice. Okay, well, we've come to a realization, a hard one, but a very useful one.
well, and I think that's like what happens when you really are in something. You're in the whole of it. It's not, this is wonderful. No, it's, yeah, this is a very full spectrum human experience.
Mm, 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 mm. All right, and what do you see happening
Whatever human
in
beings
the
will do
near
with it, I don't
future?
know. I don't know. Like, I'm gonna keep having little parties out in the woods and inviting people to come and join them. And mainstream society can do what it will.
Mm.
Um,
Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? How do you
well,
feel?
I think, I think that people are learning um, at such a rate and in so many different ways now that the idea of things being controlled and in bubbles and the gatekeepers having the power that they used to have, when they could literally either let you into the library or not. um,
Mm,
I mean, that's dead. That's gone.
mhm.
People who want to find this stuff will find this stuff. Does that mean chaotic dysregulation and unauthorized practice? Maybe, but some of us may also be doing this with, ethical integrity. And
Yeah.
it may become a wider tool than just for the medical model, colonial, clinical white man practice. So
Mm,
great.
mm, mm, mm.
I think all of those can coexist. Like, I think Gestalt can
Yeah.
work within the systems that it's within, and it might have a lot of off-label uh, side effects that are beneficial in different unexpected ways. Because it's a
Mm,
social movement, it's a philosophy, it's an activist philosophy. So,
yeah. It's alive. It's alive. Yeah.
oh, very much. Yeah,
Mm,
just may not be living in the petri dish in the lab anymore. It might have gone rogue, but that's fine. It's alive,
mm,
like you said.
yeah. So I'm not gonna put you in a tight spot to tell me which interview is your favorite because I know that would be all. But because I'm sure you've put an equal effort to all of them. But I was wondering if, in a broader spectrum, you have some therapists or some theoretic theoreticians that have had an impact to you, either during your discussion with them. I mean, you mentioned Miriam Taylor, or through their, just how they stand out, their theoretical positions.
Um, I mean, some people have, you know, just structurally, theatrically been really good interviews,
Mm,
like very good storytellers, very engaging. And some people, there's just been like this little magical spark where it's like, hey, I am interested in you, whether
mm,
what we say makes sense or not. I don't go back and look at them. It's I just go with the experience, and these are like a series of having
yeah.
had coffees with people. I don't hold on to the interview as a unit itself. It's more like a starting point for a relationship.
Mm, mm,
So sometimes it does feel like I've known people before the interview, and we may actually have, taken workshops together or something.
mm,
But a lot of things like start circling back over the years. And the whole figure ground thing, like it works. I might have had a great interview that then goes into the background, but then that person pops up in a different place years later. And I have no idea where this stuff is going to go. But it's one layer of ground. The little seeds are planted, and where those connections might go in the future, I don't know.
mhm,
Do I
mhm,
have favorites? Yeah, I have lots of favorite humans. I really love and enjoy a lot of people. Uh,
mm.
I'm not going to tell you who they are.
So one last thing, when I was invited to take this interview, I was surprised, to be honest, because I know that you know all so many therapists anyway, and but now that I hear your profile and your story, I need to say that it all makes sense, and keeping me in track with your community and everything. I'm really, honored and grateful for that discussion we just had.
Well, I appreciate that you did it, right? Because I had to go through the whole process of, oh, there's this big project, and um, maybe I want to be interviewed for it.
Yeah.
Maybe I would like to show up, and because I mean, like hiding behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz, that's usually my default position. Like I hide
Mm-hmm.
in plain sight. Like I'm the interviewer, but I'm not showing up. And then there
Yeah.
was something that I was like, oh, I need an interviewer.
Mm-hmm.
And you were one of the people who has over the years said, like, I want to do this. I want to be part of this. And there's absolutely no reason that any of you would have done that. Like there's
Of
no
course.
incentive.
Of
There's
course.
just the I just appreciate that you do. And
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about some of what you get out of doing that, but I just appreciate that you were willing to make the time.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's too soon to reflect on your experience, but how has it been so far to answer to the questions that you have structured?
It's I'm unsurprisingly fond of the model of just talking, just being, showing up,
Nice.
and I felt very welcomed, and I appreciated that.
Mm.
And like I'm familiar with the terrain in the sense that like, okay, um, but it's very comfortable, and thank you for
I
making
think.
a comfortable space.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, so I'll
Thanks.
just go back into hiding in the background now. But people seem to know where to find me, so
Yeah, in the woods.
yeah, yeah, I'm not really hidden. I'm just, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm, thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks.